There's more to Sweden than ABBA and winter depression. This little Scandinavian country has some pretty unexpected surprises. This is a list of the things you didn't know about Sweden. This isn't gonna be a top 10 list, because there are actually way too many interesting things to mention. I'm also not gonna mention things that people typically know. So you won't hear me say things like, did you know that dynamite was invented in Sweden? That's common knowledge. Instead, I'm gonna go for some more esoteric information. Let's start with the geography of Sweden. Did you know that Sweden actually has the most islands in the world? There are more than 260,000 islands in Sweden, compared to 18,000 in the US and 17,000 in Indonesia, which is an island nation. The reason for all of these islands is partly the Ice Age, which caused a lot of displacement of land. Another reason is that people believe that Sweden was closer to the equator before the continental drift, with lots of coral reefs. It's hard to imagine when you look at the cold and frigid land that Sweden is these days. It's beautiful, but it's not exactly a tropical paradise. Also, another reason that Sweden has so many islands is that Sweden might count some things as islands while other nations don't. In Sweden, as long as you can stand on it, it's an island. And sticking with geography, Sweden is also in the top 10 in the world when it comes to number of lakes. In fact, all of this is frozen water. I think that the ice is thick enough to walk on, so I'm gonna give it a shot. In case I fall in, then you'll get a first-hand account of what it's like to fall into freezing water. Anyway, let's get back to lakes. There are more than 22,000 lakes in Sweden, compared to 20,000 in Brazil and Norway. However, Canada has a whopping 879,000 lakes, and Russia has 200,000, and the US isn't too shabby either, with 100,000 lakes. But what about Finland, which is called the land of 1,000 lakes? Well, according to many sources online, like the World Population Review, Finland isn't even in the top 10. Which is a bit strange, because Finland has more than 180,000 lakes, and the World Population Review site itself even lists Finland as having all of those lakes. But for some reason they skipped Finland when listing the top 10 countries in the world. Is there a Finland conspiracy? Are people trying to hide the majestic lakes of Finland? Who knows? Now let's talk about something more exciting and a bit terrifying. Let's talk about wars. Many countries have had feuds and wars with other countries, but Sweden and Denmark are the two countries that have fought the most amount of wars with each other in the world. Since the 15th century, Sweden and Denmark have been at war with each other more than 30 times. I often make jokes about Denmark in my videos, and these days it's all in good fun. But the rivalry between our countries is rooted in all of these bloody wars that have taken place over hundreds of years. And speaking of wars, Sweden is one of only 22 countries in the world that has never been invaded by Great Britain. Other countries include Luxembourg, Mongolia, and Bolivia. However, since Sweden raided the British Isles during the Viking Age, you could say that Sweden has invaded Britain. So Sweden is most likely the only country in the world that has never been invaded by Britain, but has invaded Britain instead. Something that many people don't know is that there's a temple to the Roman goddess Diana in a park in Stockholm. This was built in 1790 as part of the Karlberg Castle Gardens, and all of this used to be rural farmlands back then. Another interesting fact about Sweden is that we have more moose per square kilometer than any other country in the world. That's something that Germans on vacation in Sweden find very interesting. They've been known to steal moose warning signs and buy moose poop. Sweden also has the most patents per capita in Europe. Or at least that's what an article online said, but I decided to look into it a bit further. In 2022, Switzerland actually had the most patents per capita, with Sweden in second place. Maybe people just can't tell the difference between Switzerland and Sweden. Regardless of that, Sweden has always punched above its weight class when it comes to innovation and invention. I talked a bit more about that in my video about the Stockholm Ice Bar. And speaking of the ice bar, the first ice hotel in the world opened in Jukkasjärvi up north in Sweden. Sorry that I only have crap footage from there. I was filming with my old Galaxy phone in bad lighting when I was visiting. The longest zipline in Europe can also be found in Sweden, in the province of Småland. It's at a place called Little Rock Lake, and the zipline is awesome. But is it really the longest in Europe? One page online said that the longest zipline in Europe is in Italy. But the same article also said that the longest zipline is in Slovenia, further down on the page, so I don't really think that they know what they're talking about. It seems to be a bit difficult to say what the actual longest zipline in Europe is, but either way, I have a hard time seeing that it's the one in Sweden. I don't just look up weird facts about Sweden, I also travel and, look up weird facts about other places too. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like that sort of thing, and also you might want to join the 3-star Vagabond Facebook group if you want to hang out with a bunch of really strange people. Something that everyone knows about Sweden is Swedish fika. Swedes love to have a cup of coffee and a pastry and have a nice chat with colleagues and friends. And the pastry of choice is of course a cinnamon bun. A proper one. Not like in the US when they cover it with white gunk. Something that you may not know is that Sweden even has a day dedicated to the cinnamon bun. October 4 is the official cinnamon bun day in Sweden. And tourists sometimes ask what happens on that day. Maybe they're expecting parades or people dressing up like cinnamon buns, but no, we just eat a lot of cinnamon buns, that's it. But there's more. There's also a saffron bun day on December 13 and a waffle day on March 25. That day is actually a bastardization of the name Vårfrudagen, which sounds a bit like Våffeldagen, which means the waffle day in Swedish. The last Tuesday before the Christian fast is also a special day. It's Fat Tuesday, or Fetisdagen as it's called in Swedish, or Fettisdagen. The name can have different meanings depending on how you pronounce it in Swedish. It's either Fat Tuesday or the Day of the Fatsos. But most importantly, that's also the Day of the Semla, a delicious type of Swedish pastry. As you can tell, Swedes take fika very seriously. There's a day for almost every type of confection. There's also a licorice day and a muffin day, and so many other days dedicated to unhealthy stuff. You can basically find an excuse to indulge in something sweet just about every day of the year. I'm going out on the ice again. This is a shortcut for me to get home, but I have to admit that it's really terrifying. Don't do this, kids. Don't walk on ice. So I'm just gonna follow everyone else's tracks. When you look at lists of the oldest publicly traded companies in the world, you often see companies that are several hundreds of years old. That pales in comparison with the Swedish company Falu Koppargruva though. There's a massive copper mine in the town of Falun, and it has been mined since the 800s. In 1288, it had become so economically significant that a royal letter declared how people could invest and buy shares in the mine. So the next time you marvel at old companies like Lloyds of London from the 1600s or Birkenstock from the 1700s, then you can think back on Falu Koppargruva that people were investing in back in 1288. Let's talk about some more odd facts about Sweden. Which language do you think is the official language of Sweden? Well, it's Swedish, so it's nothing strange, but it didn't used to be. Up until 2009, Swedish wasn't the official language of Sweden. Sweden didn't have an official language, or a main language at all. Also, something else that's pretty odd is that the only James Bond museum in the world can be found in a little rural town in the south of Sweden. In 1974, Sweden delivered 1,000 Volvo cars and some other equipment to North Korea, and North Korea still hasn't paid. The debt is now up to 3 billion Swedish crowns, but unfortunately Sweden has no hope of ever seeing that money. The world's oldest pipe organ is from 1370 and can be found in Sundre Church in Sweden. If you ever fancy going to the very southern tip of the island of Gotland, make sure you check it out. Another interesting fact is that Sweden has the highest number of McDonald's restaurants per capita in Europe. We can't compete with the numbers in the US though. Nothing can compete with the US when it comes to fast food. Terra firma, I'm back on dry land. Well, I guess the ice was pretty thick. Now let's talk about something really strange. Did you know that Sweden once had a king who became a pirate? Eric XIII was king of Sweden, Norway and Denmark in the 1400s, when the countries were united under the Kalmar Union. He's better known as Eric of Pomerania though, because he was deposed from the thrones of all of the Scandinavian kingdoms. All he had left was his duchy in Pomerania, and thus his name. He was deposed in 1439 and fled to the island of Gotland, where he stayed in exile for 10 years. During that time, he attacked merchant ships in the Baltic Sea, and basically he tried to strike fear into the hearts of every merchant operating in the Baltic. And that's probably one of the most interesting things that you most likely didn't know about Sweden, that we once had a king who became a pirate on the Baltic Sea. It's starting to get really cold, so I need to get home. But that's about it. That was a list of things that you didn't know about Sweden. Or at least I hope that you didn't know about them, because otherwise I failed miserably. Either way, like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. Now check out this video as well for even more strange facts about Sweden.